Guys, I did it. I finally found a way to get chaining explosions as a spellcaster. It's funny because I'd originally dismissed Pathfinder as a kind of boring ascendancy, and I mean, I guess it sort of is, because like it's mostly just poison, right? And yeah, like it turns out that even though it is pretty bare bones in that sense, like it lets you get the same proliferating effect that you get from Herald of Plague, right? But the one caveat is that Herald of Plague requires you to have a martial weapon. Whereas when you play Pathfinder, you can get the proliferation without the martial weapon. Which means you can get Plagueburst as your explosions, and then you can proliferate those explosions all over the place. Ooh, that looks really nice. Despite being a spellcaster, which is what this character is doing here. So yeah, don't be fooled, because even though it does look like I'm playing a poison build, I'm honestly just using poison as a delivery mechanism for the Plagueburst explosions. So we're only dealing like a very specific amount of damage as poison. And then once you get the explosions, those deal physical damage. And it turns out that that monster life percentage dealt as physical damage, you can further scale on, and then you get this. So yeah, it's like a really smooth playstyle. Ooh, that's gonna be a nice chunk. Yeah, they're all dead. Good result. And then there's like a lot of other min-maxing gimmicks that I went through in order to get like mana remnants to work. We'll go over that briefly. Oh, that's so pretty. But yeah, I just love the certainty where you don't have to deal with, what do you call it, accuracy or any of that matter. Now the downside is that, unlike attack-based explosions, you can't really scale the explosion size as much as you can with attacks. But then again, attacks are getting nerfed with their AoE next patch, so it might be comparatively in a similar spot, I guess. Either way, I'm pretty happy with how this character turned out, which is why I'm sharing it. And there's a lot of mechanics that will, I don't know if carry over, but a lot of the information could be interesting for other applications. And it's very niche information. It's pretty obscure. I don't know if anybody else has covered it. So learning about all that, is it going to go all the way around? It is. Learning about all of that is going to be valuable to other players, I hope. Let me try to zip straight into the boss, because I think you've seen enough of the clear here. Where is the boss? Might honestly just be over here. It's either that or it's curving over there. Just keeps on going. Okay, so it's not here. Man. Can't wait until we get sprint, huh? It's a bit sad that I don't think it's outright gonna solve the issues, but it's gonna help a lot. It's gonna substantially improve this kind of scenario where we're backtracking or just running from point A to point B. Nope, not there either. One of the downsides is that even though the mana remnants can overflow your mana pool, currently for as much as twice your mana, post 0.3, it's going to be 1.5. The sheer mana cost of these spells ends up eating at your mana pool, so... there's the boss. So you rarely get to go over your cap anyways. And even though the mana values are going to be readjusted, they've mentioned favorably for spellcasting so that you're not dealing with these enormous quantities.
The desert stands eternal. You will not.
Even then, I don't think you'll be able to walk around with overcapped mana since you're constantly spending it. And yeah, as you can see, like the single target of this build, it's lacking, like, it's enough to play. Like it's not bad, I guess. You can still kill bosses decently, but it's nothing as impressive as the other one-shot builds and other things that you can play. But the main point of this build was the chaining explosions anyways, and I'm pretty sure I've made a few mistakes with how I've set up my single target. There is a lot of room to grow. Man, am I actually gonna lose against this guy? Probably not. Yeah, I think we're good. Oh, is he gonna summon the... Whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. Never mind. Well, that's weird. It didn't eat up his stun. I've been getting a lot of very janky bugs in my playthroughs for whatever reason. Let's try to get some explosions on them. Man. I mean, as nice as the clear showcase was, I'm not making any good impressions for the single target, am I, huh?
Embrace annihilation. The sands obey.
Okay, good enough. Sorry about the really bad boss fight, but I don't know. It's fine. It can be a lot better. There's a lot of improvement to go through for that. But yeah, let's dive right into the explanation of how the chaining works and so forth. Alright, there's a lot to go over, so I'll try to jump into it quickly. For my gear, there's nothing too out of the world going on here. It's just the usual with resistances, or in this case, since it's mind over matter, we're going for energy shield and mana as our prefixes. And then for suffixes, you just want resistances. If you happen to get intelligence as a suffix, that's also fine, because it translates to even more mana. And then for your amulet, you're mostly going to be looking for the same mana, energy shield, and resistances, but you also want to get plus gem level to scale your damage. If you can get some other mana related suffixes or critical damage, that's also perfectly fine. For weapons, you aren't necessarily tied to using a wand and a focus. I just happen to find the highest plus gem level on my wand and focus combination. I guess there is a slight upside with focuses giving you some energy shield, which then turns into mana. But then if you use a staff, you can get that one spell, which I forget what it's called, where like you draw a rune on the floor, and as you consume mana within the rune, you get more damage. So pretty much just whatever you find that gives you the most percentage spell damage, plus physical spells skill level, and then you can go with like increased spell physical damage, or you can do a gimmick that I'm doing with gain as extra as cold, which in this case I'm doubling up with my rune, right? Anything to critical or cast speed is also very much welcome, but again, spell damage, spell physical damage, and plus gem levels is what you're looking for. On the note of gem levels, I wanted to mention that I was using a level 16 base bone cage, and then I dropped a level 17 skill gem, so I upped the level by 1, and that was with this wand, which I was using previously. So then I upgraded this wand, and in conjunction with the skill gem and this wand, I went up 2 levels. Currently 23, right? So from 21 to 23, we can simulate that by removing these two. The mana cost jump is just insane. It goes from 484 all the way up to 620. And this is at level 23, right? So with better gear and higher base level gems, I can't imagine what the mana cost ends up being. It's just insane. So it's a good thing that in the patch notes they've mentioned rebalancing the mana cost growth of all skills. And generally speaking, it's going to be similar, but potentially lower, or in this case, slightly higher. But, yeah, sometimes dramatically lower, and I believe they mentioned something in the release of the trailer for 0.3 that this was mostly aiming at spells and their, like, exorbitant mana cost increases with levels. So hopefully that'll help a good chunk with this build. If we go for skill gems, I guess the main thing to cover is Bone Cage, which is the hardest hitting, most comfortable to use one-tap spell that you'll get in order to get like the ball rolling with Plagueburst. So in order to do that, you need to poison. We're using Envenom as our first support gem. Maybe if you can min-max through the passive tree through like super endgame jewels or elsewhere, you might be able to get rid of this support and then you can get one more for damage. But you're most likely going to be using Envenom. And that's in order to enable Bursting Plague. We're kind of using this as an enabler as we were using Corrosion and Armor Explosion on the other build. So what Bursting Plague does is as you poison a monster, it'll start stacking Plague as a counter. And the rate is 1 poison, 1 plague, 100%. And it caps out at 20%, which you want to try to hit. So once you're capped out on plague, which again means you have to deal 20% of the enemy's maximum life as poison. Once you're capped out on plague, when that monster dies, it'll explode dealing physical damage equal to the plague. So this basically means that Plagueburst is a 20% corpse explosion as physical damage, which can further on apply more poison, by the way. That is the core of what we're doing, and we can scale this corpse explosion through generic percentage physical damage nodes on the tree and so forth. These two are going to be non-negotiable. It's mostly what we're doing. The third one is, in my opinion, also non-negotiable because it gives you 100% more critical hit chance against full life enemies, which when you're one-tapping with Bone Cage, they're going from full life to either dead or close to dead, and then the poison is finishing them off, and then the whole thing starts working. Now the weird thing is that if you have a 3-link, you're going to have to cast Bone Cage around yourself, which makes it very unsafe, but it could still function, so that's why I would urge you to try to get this going on a 4-link at the very least. And then for your 4th support, you have to judge between Astral Projection, which gives you the safety of being able to cast Bone Cage from afar, and then you can just do it off screen and you can blow up packs safely that way. Or you can use Magnified Effect, which will give you larger area on the Nova, but also larger explosions on Plagueburst. And you kind of want both, so that's why I would heavily recommend trying to get the 5th link. But if I had to choose between these two, I would highly prioritize Astral Projection just for the safety. Another gem that's worth mentioning is Heft. I did very, very rigorous testing to see how this interacted with the explosion from Plagueburst. You can probably catch the testing still on the Twitch VODs if you want to, but trust me on this one. I spent a lot of time into doing it. So the way it works is, despite you getting a 20% corpse explosion from Bursting Plague, it's as though the game treats this as a 20% minimum roll and a 20% maximum roll. So then when you use Heft, which only applies to the maximum physical hit damage, you'd usually expect this to work only for things like Bone Cage, where you got like the flat numbers numbered out, I guess. But strangely enough, in my testing, I was getting varied explosions. And again, it was very rigorous. I'm 100% sure this is how it works. So if you use Heft, the 30% more multiplier turns your base corpse explosion into a 20% minimum and a 26% maximum, which then further on scales with your other sources of increased damage and etc. etc. The reason I'm mentioning this is because if you find yourself struggling to get enough critical mass of passive points so that you can get everything up and running, you could maybe use Heft as a crutch. But more importantly, because it's just good information to know, maybe there's some other build that you're doing, like Detonate Dead, for instance, which also has a fixed damage, which you can also scale with Heft, or maybe like with War Cries or any other sources. But yeah, that's something worth mentioning. Okay, so for single target, I tried using the same Bone Cage plus Poison setup, and I was way more invested into Poison at the time, but the damage was just very lacking. So if you're playing a physical spellcasting character and you want something else to do for single target, your only other option is Bone Storm. And I wouldn't really complain because honestly, Bone Storm is pretty good. So as you saw, the damage is not fantastic, but it's got a lot of room to grow, and I haven't really min-maxed my single target with this character. I'm currently using Arcane Tempo for more cast speed and Scattershot for more projectiles, and I want to go over how that works with channeled spells. Because the weird thing is, if you look here, it says a cast time of 0.11 seconds, so I should be able to cast 10 times per second, right? But because it's a channeled spell, there's a wind-up before and after, which is why when you one-tap, you can't one-tap 10 times in a second. There's a delay before and after. Now the interesting thing is, this is another thing that I went very, very in-depth with testing, like with a metronome and checking BPMs to verify, because there isn't any information around here. The thing is, if you treat Scattershot as a more multiplier, because rather than casting 1 bone, you're casting 3, this more multiplier only applies to the segment in the middle, whereas increased and more cast speed applies to the entirety of the cast, including the wind-up. So if we visualize this on Paint, it kind of looks like this. You get 0.5 second cast time, roughly, to start winding up your channel, and then 0.5 seconds at the very end as well. And then whatever the cast time that is denoted on the skill is the rate at which you will replenish the casts within the channel, so after you've done the wind-up and the release. So this would be the channel. So if you get Scattershot or other sources of extra projectiles as, like, I don't know, the passive tree or unique items, etc., you're only going to be getting a more multiplier here. Whereas if you get increases and more cast speed, that will apply to this whole thing. Which is why cast speed is far more important. When I go over the skill tree, it'll start to make more sense, but yeah, this is useful information to know for other channeled skills or spells or attacks that you might be using. But yeah, roughly that is the value on those ends. So let's see. I shouldn't have closed paint, so I will need that later. Okay, so from there on, what can we do? Maybe Scattershot isn't necessary. Maybe you can scale damage better by just casting one bone at a time, because there's also this case where the limit is 20 projectiles. But then when you rack up all 20 of them, it shoots them at quite a wide area. And for unique monsters or like bosses with very large hitboxes, you might be able to hit quite multiple of them, but I doubt you're going to get all 20. And when it comes down to rare monsters, their hitboxes are roughly this wide, so you end up getting like between 5 to 10 most of the time. So maybe Scattershot isn't necessary because it's also hampering the damage per projectile. Maybe you're better off just scaling cast speed and scaling damage here. Either way, I'm also using Pinpoint Critical because my critical strike chance is 39 without it, 62 with it, almost 63. And I like consistency in my builds, but if you look at the rough data, the numbers, even using something like Heft provides you with more damage. Again, this character was not really fine-tuned for single target. I tend to gravitate more into finding chain reactions and stuff, like that's what I enjoyed the most, so that's what I focused on for this character. For my fourth link, I'm using Physical Mastery, which again is not that good. I mean, I guess even Heft yields more damage. And another gem that you could be using is considered casting, but then like that goes against the whole concept of trying to make this feel smooth and like casting your Bone Storm quickly. And then you could also use Zenith, which is also pretty good damage multiplier as long as you have very good mana regen. This could be a better option if you're playing Chaos Inoculation or Hybrid, but once you're actually taking hits into your mana pool, it's a bit hard to be over 90%, so I don't know if I would recommend that. And then the more contentious one would be Brutality. Off the get-go, Brutality is going to disable your poison, which is perfectly fine, because Bone Storm hits multiple times for smaller bits, and the poison that it applies is mostly negligible, so you could very much use Brutality. The reason I'm not using it is because it would hamper the whole gain as extra as cold, which I'm currently working with. I'll go into that in a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot of room to grow for single target. Mana Tempest is a little bit interesting. It's another one of those where, like, if you're not playing Mind Over Matter, then you can use that to increase the damage from your Bone Cage so that you can get the ball rolling with the Bursting Plague. Or you can use it to supplement your Bone Storm for single target. It's a little bit clunky where you have to, like, tap once and then tap again. Or, like, if you're fighting a boss, then you have to, like, do this and then channel. But as you can see, once you play Mana or Mind Over Matter, the cost is just not sustainable. Like, if you do this, you're dead. Like, anything hits you, it goes straight into your life. Too much damage. Same thing for bosses. This is not sustainable, and the damage is not noteworthy. But if you're going Chaos Inoculation or Hybrid, or you need an extra boost of damage while leveling, then yeah. I did use Mana Tempest a little bit prior to swapping to Mind Over Matter, which was roughly level 72 for me. But yeah, it's something worth exploring. Now, the more curious bit is what to do with your spirit. Because this build is kind of weird. There isn't really a whole lot to do with the spirit. Archmage is something that would, like, be a no-brainer as a mana build, but if you thought 600 was too much mana, like what the hell is this, dude? And even then, Archmage is for non-channeling, so it doesn't really help your single target. Archmage is, once again, crutches that you can use if you're struggling to deal enough damage with Bone Cage to get your explosions going off. Other than that, don't use Archmage. Now, I personally don't like playing with minions, so let me get some dexterity here. I was very eager to use Trail of Caltrops, because there's this functionality with Bone Storm, where not only are you hitting for physical, but you're also impaling. And impaling stores a percentage of the damage that you're dealing with a spell. And then whenever anybody attacks the target that has impale stacks, they expend those impale stacks and they release the damage that is stored. So if I could find a way to get an attack into this build in order to trigger my impales, that would improve my single target, is what I thought. And if you look at Trail of Caltrops, well, it looks perfect, right? There isn't any requirement for martial weapons or anything of that matter, and the Caltrops being detonated count as attacks. So that sounds perfect. Like, sure, we can roll around, leave these things, cast our Bone Storm, and then whenever the monsters hit these, we'll be expending the impales. So flavor-wise, this sounded really good, but for whatever reason, the second you equip a wand or a staff, like a caster weapon, where did my Caltrops go? Why am I not dropping Caltrops? There isn't anything here about requiring a weapon, and you can clearly use them without a weapon when you're unarmed. So the only reason why you wouldn't be able to use Caltrops when you're using caster weapons is because no fun allowed, I guess. So rip that idea, right? So what else can we do? We can maybe use Cast on Critical. We are playing a critical build after all. And then what are we going to be triggering with Cast on Critical? Could use Detonate Dead to better the clear, but the clear is already really good. And the corpse explosions that you're getting are only 10%, whereas the Plagueburst ones are 20%. So this doesn't seem very relevant. Even more so because the energy generation is not very high when it comes to white and blue mobs. It's pretty good whenever you're hitting rares or bosses. So then, like, Detonate Dead is out of the question. The other option could be using Bone Cage. I don't know if this is going to work with the patch in 0.3, because you're not going to be able to use 2 copies of the same skill gem. But I don't know if using them in meta gems is not something that will count towards. Either way, if you wanted to use Bone Cage for a single target, you'd have to remove the projection from your Bone Cage and then stick it into your Cast on Critical. With 0.3 you would be able to get 2 copies, but either way, what I'm getting at is that even if you do this, it turns out it's no good. Because what you're doing here is, let's say you're standing here, and then you got like a big angry boss standing over here, right? So then you shoot your Bone Cage shards, or Bone Storm shards, sorry, and then you generate energy, and you trigger your Cast on Critical very quickly. You're going to get Bone Cages spawned around the boss. But them being spawned around the boss repeatedly does not mean that they're going to be hitting him. They're just going to be stacking around him. So, like, you're not getting anything out of this. Now, you could use a different spell, like, I don't know, Fireball or something of a different element, but you don't have as good scaling for that. And for 100 Spirit, I don't know, it didn't seem worthwhile to me. So, yeah. You're not using Cast on Critical either. What else can you do? Well, I mean, I said I didn't like minions, but I did try using minions for a good bit, and as far as releasing the Impale goes, it's fine. It's not crazy good, but it's fine. Your best options for minions would be spirits, and specifically the ant is pretty good, but it costs 40 spirit. The reason the ant is good is because its attack time is 0.69. Nice. But at 40 spirit, you can get the equivalent of 4 terracotta soldiers, which you can get in Act 2, by the way, and even without the martial tempo. Yeah, this is another issue. The statues will always be frozen at the start of every zone. When you die, when you zone into a map, etc. You have to use command minion to get them to move, and then once they're active, they will auto-attack and you don't have to target anything again. Like, they will become alive. But yeah, the terracotta soldiers, a lot slower. Like, I don't know, this is roughly 50% slower, I think? Or, I don't know, like maybe 40, I don't know. But you're getting 4 of them, so it's way more hits. And you can amplify that. But even if you amplify the attack timer on the soldiers, honestly I'm finding that I'm stacking impales like 60 stacks very quickly. And while I'm stacking 60 stacks of impale, at best, if you're using all 10 soldiers with all of your spirit, they're roughly consuming like 10 to 20 of those impale stacks. Meanwhile, you're just constantly replenishing them. So it's not a huge more damage multiplier. Although I will give them the merit that having minions are always a good defensive layer, because they eat up a lot of projectiles and they distract enemies from attacking you. So if you're into minions, more power to you. That's one option which I thought I should go over. The other things you can do is blasphemy, and then you can get vulnerability. Usually armor isn't very relevant, and I don't think it's like terribly relevant here either. It doesn't have anything to do with bone cage or your explosions, but at least for single target, and assuming you're in range of the boss, diminishing their armor might work out because Bone Storm is multiple little hits of physical damage, and armor prevents more damage the smaller the hit. So perhaps vulnerability is fine. For the most time, like for the largest amount of time, I was playing Blasphemy plus 4 of these. 4. But then I started tinkering, because since I'm playing a mana build, it would be really good if I could slot in mana remnants, get more recovery, more safety, and maybe even overflow my mana pool, which is working as my life pool. But in order to do that, the enemy has to be targeted with an elemental ailment when it dies, or if it's a boss, you have to critical hit it while it has an elemental ailment. Something that worked really well for this league was the gimmick I was doing with Gain Extra is Cold, because it's very easy to tag a monster with a very weak chill, as long as you're dealing some amount of extra cold damage. This also comes into the Bursting Plague Explosion for a little bit bonus damage, but that's kind of another topic. I mean, it does contribute to generating charges while clearing. But the issue with all of this is that, as of 0.3, chill is going to last longer. But previously, you had to deal enough damage to generate 5% chill for it to be active. With 0.3, they're buffing that all the way up to 30%. So I don't know if this gimmick is going to be worthwhile, and at this rate, maybe rather than going for chills, if it's still worth it, it would be better to go for lightning, so that you can get shocks. It might not be as consistent when clearing, but at least you'll be able to get shocks for bosses, which would help your single target a good chunk. Again, if none of this works, then maybe you don't use mana remnants altogether, and then you just focus on getting wands with increased spell physical damage rather than the gain as extra as a gimmick. you're going to have some leftover spirit. You can either do the whole minion thing. You can maybe use clarities here as well for some extra mana regen. But there's also this spirit gem, which I'm very eager to test because it might feel kind of like Righteous Fire, especially if you set it up properly, kind of like what I'm doing here, I guess. Because it's intelligence based, which is what we're doing. And then while active, nearby enemies get swarmed by like tiny minions that attack and poison. The attack portion could be good for the impales on Bone Storm. And then if they're poisoning, who knows, you might be able to get Plagueburst onto this and then just walk around and have the whole bunch of little insects blow everything up, which would make for an auto-bomber kind of playstyle. I'm very eager to test this. I don't know if it'll be the first character that I play. I might as well just like slap it onto this character in standard and see how it goes, but yeah, enough about that. So yeah, we've gone through the entirety of skill gems and spirit gems. We should next jump straight into the passive tree. So to begin, the Ascendancy is the Pathfinder. You can't really do this on another one, and I dismissed this, as I mentioned, very early on because it's kind of bland in my opinion. You usually just get like more poison, and then you get like +5 passives, which is kind of whatever. Like for an Ascendancy, it's not very exciting. It is strong, like 5 passives is nice. I like to play with my passive tree. But yeah, it doesn't really change the way the game functions much. This is the node that lets you spread your poison as you do with Herald of Plague, but you don't need to use a martial weapon, so this is how you're enabling everything. I believe the radius is slightly smaller. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I think Herald of Plague is 1.8. Either way, if you're playing a spellcaster, beggars can't be choosers, this is what we've got. So it's pretty cool that like you get this node. You can get it off your first Ascendancy. And since you're not really playing a poison build, you don't really need this other node here. So you can just like skimp out on this and just get extra passives. Another option would be going down this route. Being unaffected by slows is good for defenses. And then further on you could maybe get this so that your Bone Storm channeling feels better. Maybe. Otherwise you could also go down this route, get immunity to 1 ailment. Probably shock is what you would want, since that can get you killed quite easily. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like maybe you cut this node and then you get this full branch and then you get this. It's up to you. All you really do need is the spread. That's all there is to the Ascendancy. And then for the passive tree, gee, where do I begin? The bread and butter for this build to function is getting these 2 clusters of poison, and then getting as much generic physical damage as you can get. I've gotten this cluster here, this cluster there, this one over here, and that one over there. Since we're also playing a critical build, you got these nodes which are very precious. Increased damage across the board if you've dealt a critical hit recently. The reason you want to do this is so that all of these nodes, the critical damage ones, in conjunction with these physical nodes, give you roughly 246% increased physical damage. So if we do the math, Plagueburst deals 20% of monster life as an explosion, and then you're getting 246 as an increase on top of your 100% base. So you can multiply that by 3.46 is what I'm getting off of this, which means you get 69.2% corpse explosion. 69, nice. This value is important because you can't really go overboard. You can't get, I mean you can, but it's not efficient. Because you want to have a little bit of leeway from the corpse explosion to be hit by a poison. That way you can get the plague counter, which will get you the Plagueburst explosion. So from this hit, you get your poison. Poison as a base, if you look at the fourth paragraph, says the base poison is 20% of the hit per second. And if you look at the first paragraph, the base duration is 2 seconds. So at a base, you're dealing 40% of the hit as poison over 2 seconds. So if we punch that in here, we're working with 27.68% of the monster's life as poison over time. We can then multiply that through these magnitude clusters, as well as this increased effect, which is a different modifier. From my understanding, this works kind of like a more multiplier, and it should work as I think, but when you spread a new poison, you're spreading an equivalent poison, but it counts as applying a new one. So if you apply a poison for 100%, let's say, when you spread it to a new target, it'll get buffed into 160. And then when that monster dies, that poison will get proliferated to the next one. But because it's a new poison for a value of 160, it'll get increased furthermore by 160, so it keeps on ramping up. This node is very valuable. Not only that, but since it's separate to poison magnitude, I believe these work as a more multiplier. And if that's the case, then our base of 27.68 will go up to 44% just off of this one node. And then the magnitude that you get from these two clusters totals to 65% magnitude. I believe I forgot to include this 12 actually, so 77 magnitude. So if you go times 1.77, you're getting 78% of the corpse life as poison over 2 seconds. You add the 69 corpse explosion, and you're hitting 150 as a total of each monster slain as a combination of the explosion as physical and the poison that is left over, and then you just proliferate that further. Now the reason you don't want to go overboard with 100% as physical is because if you kill the monster and then it explodes, the explosion is going to hit neighboring monsters. Maybe I should bring back paint here. Okay. So if you have a whole bunch of monsters scattered about, and then you kill this one, and let's assume that the Plagueburst ramped up to 20%, and then you get your full multiplication. If this corpse explodes for 100%, and it hits all of these guys, let's say, then the 100% is just going to knock this guy out, and these will not have any plague stored onto them, because the poison didn't deal any damage. So then that's where your chain will stop. Whereas if you hit them for like 80% or less, then the remainder can be stacked as poison, and then the Plagueburst is going to grow on them. So then when these die, these will subsequently explode as well. It's also valuable because sometimes you can get like a tiny monster, because this is assuming they're all the same monster life. But what if you have like a tiny monster and then like a large monster? When the large monster dies, it's got more life, so even if it's, I don't know, 80% monster life, 80% of this guy is still going to one-shot this guy. So then your chain ends once again. And then if you scale your poison subsequently, then when this guy dies, since it's 150%, maybe the explosion plus poison can knock this guy out. So that's why these values are what are keeping the build working. Now, if you really want to, you can further increase your poison. You've got one more poison cluster in vicinity. It's just not super important. With these two, you've got more than enough. And then for the sake of getting your chance to poison high enough, Mine is not quite at 100%. I believe it was at like 82, maybe? Yeah, 82. You can get that via your jewels, on top of the 50% from the support, and there's a few clusters here, so if you're struggling to find jewels, you can, rather than pay through magnitude, you can pay in through the chance here, and you can maybe pick up a little bit of extra chance there. Another very important cluster is this one. Increased damage with hits against enemies on full life, and then also increased critical bonus against full life, as well as 50% critical chance against full life. All of this is going to make it so that your bone cage is very, very consistent. So it'll let you get started very early on, and at least in these like late 70s, early 80s, they're still very good. But once you hit later into the game, maybe you can drop it off and just focus straight on crit bonus. I'm still missing a little bit here, which is only for spells, and I guess it's worth mentioning that Plagueburst does have a crit base. It is only 5%, but it's better than nothing. Usually you just want to ignore the crit chance on it, and if you get it, then that's great. If not, doesn't matter. You're dealing enough damage regardless. But yeah, this cluster is very valuable for your clearing and one-shotting monsters. Other than that, the skeleton of the build is just getting crit bonus, crit chance, crit damage, more crits, and then you start getting cast speed for your single target. So there's a nice 16% cast speed here, followed with another few smaller cast speed multipliers. You've got more cast speed right over here. This one also has like intelligence, which ends up being more mana, and mana regen, which is very valuable if you opt to go for the mind over matter version. And there's a little bit of cast speed right here, which is hiding behind this one node, which is very valuable. So yeah, like this ends up being the skeleton for your build, right? And there, as I mentioned previously, there's like a critical mass where you can't get less physical damage increases without it breaking. You need this many for it to function, and you also need these many poison clusters. So then simultaneously getting your crit chance and crit damage is a bit rough, which is why this node is so valuable for that. So once you got this skeleton ironed out, you gotta pick your defenses. If you choose to go hybrid, then you can drop off the mind over matter, you can drop off this cluster for mana. There's some other mana over here as well. And you can just focus on energy shield. So you got some energy shield right here. You got energy shield over here, and you got more over there. Now I did some testing for energy shield as well, and as I mentioned, like I wasn't using convalescence, and I'm personally also not very good at playing energy shield builds. I don't know, lack of skill if you want to call it, but going mind over matter just felt very nice, and it felt like it solidified the build a lot for me. You're already in range of mind over matter and Eldritch Battery. You just got like a nice chunk of mana over here. Then you get this node, which further scales your damage, which is really nice. You can get Arcane Surge basically for free, because when you're killing monsters, like eventually one of your Plague Bursts is going to crit, and then you got it. Plus you don't really need it when you're clearing, since everything is popping. But for your single target, even though this is just 10% chance, since it's multiple hits on Bone Storm, you're basically getting Arcane Surge uptime all the time. And Arcane Surge is a more multiplier to cast speed, so that's really good for improving your damage. And like, just coincidentally, you happen to pay through very efficient mana regen nodes right here. You got the whole chunk there, and then you got some more here. But yeah, the other thing I mentioned was besides cast speed, you can multiply your single target damage by getting additional projectiles. Those would be through these nodes up here, and the small cluster which is right nearby. Now, I don't know if it's worth it. I forget the entire, like, the total. If you get all of these nodes, I think it's something like 50% chance to get 2 additional projectiles. So it's kind of like getting 1 additional projectile, something along the lines of that. And that only applies to your Bone Storm, and it only applies to the channeling segment in the middle, so maybe it's not worth it. And you could technically bridge this gap rather than through this one node that gives you access to this cluster down here. That would let you pick up 1 additional node for increased physical damage. And I say it would only let you pick up this one node, because these gain as extra are not very good. They'll tack on to the base explosion of 20%, and then you're going to multiply that 20% through physical damage, but then the chaos that you gain is just going to stay down as that tiny percent that you're gaining. So if you do pay down here, you only want this node, but not the rest of the cluster. Another very important thing is you can get mana gain on kill on your gems, on your clusters, on your jewel clusters. I didn't get them, unfortunately, but you just happen to casually path through this node, which gives you 2% max mana on kill. 2% of a very large mana pool is going to be a good relevant amount, and it'll keep you safe if you're playing the Mind Over Matter version while you're clearing, which is another reason why I chose to go for the mana base. Just in case this is what my jewels are looking for, or looking like, just like some poison magnitude, just chance to poison, a little bit of magnitude as well. The other 2 nodes are whatever. And this one has chance to poison plus a little bit of projectile damage for single target. Alright, I believe that's everything I had to say. I hope it was. I hope I didn't miss anything else. I know this video is really long, but there was a lot of very intricate mechanics and interesting points to make. Things that I explored that could be relevant to other builds, which is very obscure information that you probably won't be getting anywhere else. But yeah, with the upcoming changes of 0.3, it seems like chaining explosions with Herald of Ice and Armor Explosion as a Warbringer is still going to be viable, as will the whole Herald of Plague, Corrosion, Armor Explosion setup that I've got on my other characters. However, both of those will be getting an area of effect nerf. I don't know how large the nerf will be or how bad it'll feel, but they should still be working. If anything, my biggest worry would be that for those kind of archetypes, Resolute Technique is no longer going to be the absolute certainty of hits can't be evaded, so you're still going to be needing accuracy. And for monsters within your range or your screen, that might be good enough. But when you're proliferating explosions off of the screen, maybe the accuracy will drop off, and maybe the Resolute Technique nerf is going to be pretty bad there. If that's the case, you could actually do something similar to this with the mace builds, and rather than going chance to poison, corrosion, armor explosion, you just go chance to poison, Plagueburst. And if you're playing a Titan, you can get your chance to poison right there. You can increase your magnitude of the poison here. And then you can get like a large chunk of increased physical damage through these clusters over there and over here. Not only that, but you'd have to use the shield skills that give you 1% per chance to block here and here, which are also getting a nerf since block is naturally going to be capped at 50%. Unless you're playing a Warbringer, but this is like for the Titan build, so I don't know. But I just thought I should mention that. Either way, I'm going to be exploring a good amount of things when the patch drops. I think I have like 7 character plans, vaguely. Who knows how many of those will actually be worth it and will actually make it into a video, but yeah. No need to spoil that either, like maybe it's just bad. but we'll figure it out. So I'll see you when 0.3 drops by, and in case I don't, I hope you have a very nice league start. And beyond that, I hope you guys are doing well. So take care, and thanks for listening to me yap.